evening. My name is Tony Jones, and you are tuned in to The Coalition, where we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events. With me in studio is Christine. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tony.
The P.O. taxpayer is here. P.O., good evening.
Now, how are you tonight, Tony?
P.O., I am told we knocked it out of the park on our New Year's Eve broadcast this year. Feedback from across the globe, people who it was New Year's Eve like 24 hours before we were actually on the air for them. But they still liked it.
If that van was a knocking, that you kept on rocking.
We should pat ourselves on the proverbial back.
Ready?
For that New Year's Eve
You were
broadcast.
the live soundtrack for the New Year's Eve for all of Rhode Island.
That was a surreal moment for me, was that people were having parties and listening to our broadcast.
And the parties continued even after I spoke.
They're still going. the sect, the group that we appeal to, they're probably still going right now.
Is it New Year's yet?
Hey, man.
Dude.
I think it's now pronounced New Year's week. So,
well, with Providence, the disappointment for me that night was driving home after the show, after our portion of the show, and maybe being a little more of an early bird now these days. Around 11:30, I drove from Wickenden Street all the way up Hopeless Street into the Bucket, and I saw one place open. This was 11:30 at night. Mm-hmm. Providence, what has happened to my city?
So I got here crazy early because I was nervous about finding a parking spot, and I was nervous about traffic, and I was nervous about people dressed as police officers collecting revenue. So I drove here with no traffic and found a parking spot, no problem. And then leaving here, I was here fairly late. It was kind of like what you would consider to be the peak of New Year's Eve when I left here. I was nervous about getting out of the city to get back to the suburbs, and there was nothing going on.
Tony, it was just 3 or 4 years ago. I can remember crowded streets, lots of high drama, families out and about. We talked about this last week. In retrospect, the failure becomes even more stunning. We've got a mayor in this city, the fallen angel, who is intent on becoming governor when clearly he hasn't even established a baseline level of competence in running the city. He claims credit for getting out of this Category 5 that his mentor left us in, but at the same time, A, are we really out of there? And B, is there any vision? Is there any path forward? It strikes me he is merely intent on resume padding, resume enhancing, and collecting campaign contributions.
Yeah, but he's a nice guy.
And he's ours. And,
right.
It's, in fact, if you look at the entire gubernatorial field, short of someone we've got joining us in just a few minutes, the vision thing seems to be absent. You've got the inside story here is you have 2 graduates of Classical High, the Fung and the Fallen Angel, and all we've heard is a monotonous string of cliches, Tony. And, again, getting back to New Year's Eve, it's just crushing. I mean, to me, Providence, I'm from the New York City area, and I worked in Manhattan for years. And to me, Providence resembles kind of what Chelsea and Lower Manhattan, that sort of same vibe that it had for years. You had, the eclectic mixing in with the ordinary families. You've got art, you've got performance, you've got music, you've got college students, you've got it's just this incredible chemistry. And where has it gone, Mayor Tavares?
It was actually just in pure rowdiness factor. We should start a rowdiness scale on this show because I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I used to be a little bit of a wild man back in the day.
Right, back in the day.
Yeah.
But it was actually rowdier. The bar rooms of East Greenwich were emptying out. So by the time I got home, it was actually rowdier for New Year's Eve in East Greenwich than it was here in the city.
Yeah.
Well, I think it speaks to how much Bright Night used to bring people downtown. Right. I think without that happening, a lot of people assume it's going to be crowded in the bars. I don't know if I want to go to a bar anyway. I can't take my kids to a bar. What am I going to do? And so they just stay home. And I think everyone assumed that everybody else would be out drinking and hanging out in bars downtown.
Amateur hour.
Yeah. And so it ended up being the case that nobody did it.
Folks need to understand that the difference between Providence and Bridgeport is a handful of universities and an artistic element that exists here in the city. the assumption that will continue unabated, that folks will come into the city as urban pioneers and create a nightlife and create an environment that's hospitable to all, that's a dangerous assumption. That can go away very quickly.
It doesn't happen by itself, and it doesn't happen without some baseline level of nurturing.
Right. So if you sit back and assume that, all these great restaurants are always going to be here, all right, and all these great bars and this music scene, this incredible petri dish that is Providence.
Hookah bars.
It seems like the city is overtly working to just squash whatever development is here, all in the honor of creating yet another developed space for Buff Chase. We had Taza. We joked about last week. We were talking about Taza. Right. Now all of a sudden we realize this week Taza is not only leaving us, but he's leaving us allegedly. Because we're only interested in the real news here. Tony, all the news that fits we print. Because Mr. Chase decided not to renew their lease. Hello? Isn't the fallen angel inexorably tied in with the Chase Meister? Isn't the entire Route 195 commission tied into the Chase Meister? Is this the new is Buff Chase the new Paolino? Is he the person running downtown here? And so we must all pay some type of economic homage to Buff Chase? Oye, oye? It's disgusting.
Well, there may be some compelling reason why this happened, but we haven't yet heard it.
Well, and then again, that's leadership.
I'm not saying that there is a compelling reason why. The Taza incident, to pick one. We have no idea what Buff Chase is planning for the space at this point.
No, and
parking lot,
right?
Yeah, I certainly hope it's not a parking lot.
Well,
but who knows?
Are we going to create nomads out of some of these great restaurants and bars until they, unable to maintain one space long enough, they'll die, just because of confusion? I look back to Lupo's.
It's a tough call because, Buff Chase has a right to do what he wants to with his property.
But
we also need a stable downtown. Businesses need to know that if they open a business, establish a location, pour tons of money into building a kitchen, that they're not flushing their money down the toilet.
Only open on water fire nights.
There you go.
And you're all set.
Okay, so 12 nights a year.
Yeah.
Not a problem. But again, I get back to the V word, the vision thing. You're right. Private entrepreneurs, as a capitalist, I would never deny them the right to self-determine what to do with property. But when your entire mantra seems to be to redevelop downtown, and we all know that on the wink, wink, nod, nod, some of these developers get favorable treatment. It's... no bid contracts. Where's the vision? Where's the leadership?
Right.
And again, I reiterate what I said last week. To the fallen angel, I invoke to me the ultimate curse. Buddy would have found a way to get it done.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind everybody to check out coalitionradio.us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and on Twitter at @Coalition_radio. You can interact with the program there throughout the live broadcast. So if you're only listening on the podcast, you must listen to the live broadcast if you'd like to interact with us throughout the program. And we always enjoy non-crazy questions for our in-studio guests. The best way is by Twitter, Coalition_radio, Facebook. Everybody out there knows how to get a hold of me because I owe them all money, so they're looking for me.
To clarify one point, we enjoy the crazy questions you pose us as well, but we're not going to read them on the air.
We'll read them here, and we'll have a good belly laugh.
During the break, but we're not going to answer crazy questions on the air.
We're one step above crazy questions, P.O.
Well, and listen, I've got a ready supply of aluminum foil for everyone. But speaking of crazy, just downright, you know what crazy, all right? One of my favorite publications in the state is, of course, online, and that's golocalprov.com, or as I like to refer to them, Go Loco. They've been having their own sort of Business Academy Awards this year, and I get them. The Woman of the Year was Ms. Raymundi, which... the Gina Raymundi, types came out. They took their early coffee break down at the Pawtucket City Hall and couldn't wait to post that Gina is the future. by the way, who's a very accomplished, intelligent individual whose entire campaign right now seems to be the fact that she's a woman. Hear me roar.
And has $2 million.
And has $2 million. All right? Which we're happy, by the way, just if I could point out the sales department here, contact the sales department, Gina. We're happy to advertise on your behalf. And given as a glorified car salesman, I will certainly suspend any sort of critical comments about you if you're willing to advertise here. My ethics are clearly for sale. All right? Sorry, Chris, you were about to jump in.
Well, yes, she's a woman. I don't think that's the only thing her campaign is being based on.
Right now, if you go to her Facebook page,
okay,
she's literally baking cookies. The only thing that's missing is the apron and ward cleaver.
Well, that's I'm wondering if she's distracting away from the pension brouhaha. Because you would expect someone who has been the treasurer to be running on their record. Here's what I did as treasurer. Here's what I'll do as governor. And at this point.
And she does have a record, and it's become a decidedly mixed one.
Right.
But I get her as the woman of the year because the notion of a man or a woman of the year, I've always thought was not just a positive endorsement per se, but a reflection of someone who's had a significant impact on a constituency.
And that definitely is the case. She has had a significant impact.
Right. The man of the year was Giovanni Ferrocci, who is buying up every novelty property in Rhode Island. God bless you, Giovanni. We haven't met, but again, we'd love to have you advertise here. Did
you say that Miss Raimondo is making cookies?
Something like that.
At this point, we should just give her an ad for some cookies.
Yeah.
Is it the cookies I normally eat or a different kind of cookie?
No,
I think they're regular cookies.
Decidedly different cookies.
All right.
Okay.
A little confusion.
Yeah, there you go. So Giovanni Ferrocci was the man of the year. And again, I think it's fair to say that regardless of how you feel about bangles and jewelry, Alex Anani has made a tremendous imprint on this state, mostly positive in the last handful of years, and is an economic force to be reckoned with. However, somehow the salons at Go Loco have decided that the company of the year is, drumroll please, sound effects, Twin River? Are you kidding me? For the love of God.
I think they got a hold of my cookies.
Twin River has single-handedly done more to destroy the economy of the state in the last handful of years.
Not if you're a bored little old lady,
or an oxygen vendor.
Right.
It's repulsive to me that they would take this opportunity. There are so many great little success stories in this state that should be advocated upon. If you were going to talk about a business of the year in the pejorative sense, I mean, to me, actually, the business of the year in Rhode Island was clearly 38 Special. I mean, if there's one company that left an imprint.
That's true. And there were very few companies that were spoken of with any even close to the airtime or airspace as 38 Special.
Right. And by the way, and we blog about this. I love Go Loco. I think they get it. I think they are providing a service to the state. As the Providence Journal fades gently into that good night, as they abdicate any sort of journalistic responsibility whatsoever, as they become merely just a glorified obituary sheet, all right?
They're an ad circular, basically. It's ads.
They become a shopper.
Yeah.
They become a shopper. Yeah. They went from being one of the great newspapers in America to being a shopper. They went from being a newspaper that routinely elevated journalists up to the big league newspapers like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. They routinely developed talent that became worthy of Pulitzer Prizes, and now they become a shopper.
Right.
All right. So I love Go Loco, but again, I can't think of their entire pitch for Company of the Year was, here's a company who's prepared for the future. All right, let's understand what they're prepared for. What they're prepared for is a company that is now taking Rhode Island blood money, nothing less than Rhode Island blood money, and investing it in separate corporations to buy and acquire other gambling properties in other parts of the country.
Because they know Twin River has a shelf life.
Exactly.
Right.
So they are using the...
it's spoiling quickly.
What's that smell? That's Twin River.
The extra $2 coupons that you see in Stop and Shop are on Twin River right now. So they're taking our money, and again, this is capitalism, except for one difference. This is state-sponsored capitalism. This is Stasi-sponsored capitalism. This is the state of Rhode Island's government putting its imprimatur on a business that ultimately has bled us dry, and they are creating an environment where in a year or two, see ya, but I wouldn't want to be ya. Where do we go from here? Why do we... Why do we encourage that to happen? You know that when the gambling market collapsed post-Massachusetts expansion, they're going to come hat in hand with their failing corporation, which is only going to own the assets to Twin River and Lincoln, Rhode Island, and you're going to say, we want more. Please, sir, may I have some more? And we will fall for it, as we do time and time again, and give them more. And at the same time, they build it. I mean, God bless them. That's American business, I guess. Absent of any ethics, absent of any morality, absent of any concern for the taxpayer at this point.
Sounds like working in radio.
Bleed them dry. So my hat's off to you, Go Loco.
I will not be sorry to see video slots die in this state. They're the worst for people, and it's time for them to go away.
Why state government should elevate itself to being a limited provider of services, and at the same time a marketer of a state that seeks to shine on the best that Rhode Island has to offer. So we've got a state that spends an ungodly, and this is why I'm going to bring the two issues together before we bring our guests in. We've got a state that ultimately expends great effort to advertise on behalf of a gambling system that robs the poor, while at the same time ignoring opportunity after opportunity to market its capital city to families who live in the state. And that, to me, folks, is why I'm disgusted tonight.
That's why he's disgusted tonight,
Just
ladies
tonight?
and gentlemen. Yeah. He'll be disgusted about something entirely different next Sunday. So be sure to tune in next Sunday to find out what that will be. And one last thing I'd like to say is that I understand the Providence Journal is for sale. The Below Company in Texas has decided it's not enough of a cash cow anymore. After having gutted it, after having basically carved its Lifebeat section from 20 pages down to 4 or whatever it is these days. Nothing but ads.
I have an idea for a tie-in. This could be revolutionary. Radio obituaries.
Sounds good.
I will use my professional radio voice, and I will read your obituary live over the air if you put it in the Providence Urinal.
Right, with a great deal of dignity and aplomb and the respect to which it's due. If you can't afford Tony's rates, I will do it in a sarcastic, silly manner. Right?
Alfred E. Newman will come in and read it.
We will be offering a suite of different tones for these obituaries.
We could put Bob Plain to work. He could come in and read some obituaries for us.
If you want the dancing on someone's grave tone, if you want the genuine grief-stricken tone, we can do that for you.
There you go. Well, hey,
and also, if anyone out there is a publishing tycoon who would like to buy the Providence Journal and turn it around, the citizens of Rhode Island would really appreciate that, because we need a newspaper.
A lonely state
yes.
cries out for you.
A lonely state that was once a one newspaper town is now a no newspaper town.
I would have to disagree. I don't think we need a newspaper. Well, if you have a bird cage, you probably need a newspaper.
There is a calamari industry.
I don't know that we need a printed newspaper,
Fish and
but
chips.
we need news. We need someone who's like professional journalists or people with that kind of training and that kind of ethical stance to go out there and hunt down real stories. I appreciate what Go Local Prov is doing, but I think we need more than just that.
Right. Understood. Well, tonight we are happy to have joined with us a very special guest, fresh off, and we're going to tease him a little bit about this today, but fresh off an appearance on the Tara Granahan Show on WPRO, one that bred great controversy. That was Todd Giroux. I got to tell you, I listen to the shows on Saturday afternoons, kind of as background music, and I
listen to the shows on Saturday afternoons and I throw up.
That's you're
awful.
Out of nowhere, the lines were exploding. All right, because of your candidacy. So I want to welcome Todd Giroux. Todd, thanks for coming in today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Todd is a Democratic candidate for governor. You're running for the Democratic nomination at this point?
Correct.
Fair enough. We're going to get into background. We're going to get into issues. Let me just give the normal disclaimer that we do when candidates come on the air with us. Number one, we are an outrage porn-free zone. We don't care about Christmas trees. We don't care about Christmas carols. We don't care about flags, monuments. That is irrelevant to us. Those are nothing but hot-button emotional issues foisted upon the media public in an attempt to what we call Operation Change the Subject. Number two, we do not handicap elections. I don't care how much money you've got. I don't care about your fundraising apparatus. I don't care if you're going to use public revenue sharing. I don't care if you're going to use a rich uncle. I don't care if you're going to steal from senior citizens.
Unless you're going to spend it here.
Exactly. And again, the theme for tonight is we're willing to spend all ethics if you're willing to spend it here. All right?
Our palms are open, folks.
All right. However, what we do care is not if you're going to win. We want to know why you should. We want to see that vision thing. As one of the other media types across town has been repeating yesterday, I think he listens to our show, by the way. I think Buddy listens. We don't care about whether or not you're tossing a football around with one of your buddies. We don't care about whether or not you're baking cookies. We don't care if you have if you and your family have matching, light blue denim jeans and white T-shirts on. Irrelevant. So, Todd, tell us about yourself and tell us why you should be the next governor of Rhode Island.
Hey, folks. My name's Todd Giroux. I ran in 2010 as an independent candidate for governor, and I'm a Main Street guy. I work construction. I've been in the midst of watching Rhode Island, fall to pieces for a number of years, and seeing this from the Main Street point of view. It's about investment in Rhode Island. And for me, in this campaign, it's Main Street versus Wall Street. You mentioned Gina Raimondo. She's a Wall Street hedge fund type. Folks have been working 20 years for their pensions here in the state. It's taken one term to unravel a lot of that. I wish he had focused more on growing the pension fund rather than attacking the people of Rhode Island. So my focus for this campaign is, look, we got $7 billion. Let's send less to Wall Street. Focus $1 billion of investment here in Rhode Island and create $200 million in small business loan fund, $200 million in property loan fund, set up as a revolving fund. That money will continue to work into the future for the people and businesses of Rhode Island. It's not money just spent and out the window and gone. It's set up as a revolving fund. And the next $400 million of investment is infrastructure. And, we're going to need a new hurricane barrier. The highways continually need, work. So for me, it's about investment and jobs. I believe a jobs plan can come out of those small business and property loans. Folks need windows, furnaces, all those sorts of things. And working with the small businesses of the state, the Department of Labor and Training, if those people are the first in line in that flow chart, then you've got a jobs plan that's paid for from those property owner loans, and it's not a burden of the state. It's taking action and supporting the labor of the state. Now, I also support lowering the state sales tax. And so as you do that, you're going to need, a reserve pool of money to offset those dynamic budget gaps. And that's what the remaining $200 million is for, is simply a set-aside. We're always hearing about the budget shortfalls every year from the legislature. So as long as we don't run $50 million short 4 years in a row, we're going to have this set aside as we lower the state sales tax. Now, the big news on the WPRO this week, as I'm supporting legalization of marijuana here in the state, just like Colorado, same thing, 2.9% sales tax. We can become the Amsterdam of New England, and all businesses in this state become regionally competitive as we lower the state sales tax. And with the only East Coast destination, travel and tourism will boom. And I think this is the path forward for the millennials of the state who are concerned about growing the economy, the economic base of the state.
In the few minutes leading up to our break, I want to focus on one issue that's sort of kind of ignored. You and Ken Block, out of all the variety of people who are running to become governor, are the only two people who have actually legitimately be employed in what I call the dreaded private sector. And between you and Ken Block, you are the only candidate who has actually, gotten his hands dirty. Tell us about, where you're from and your family construction business and just the kind of work that you do around the state, because I think it's critical as a candidate to have that type of connection, that physical, day-to-day, hands-on connection to the real community, not to Halitosis Hall, not to the federales in D.C., but you've got a real connection. We drove in together today, and you were right with examples you were pointing out. I worked on this building. Give us some background in the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then after the break, we're going to go through every single issue.
I started working when I was 10 years old. My dad would put the hard hat on me, and I'd walk onto a union job site, and he'd say, "Follow me," you know. And I'd walk into this huge construction site, and I'd be puttying holes and all these things. So at that age, whether it be the RISD Museum gallery, hardwood floors with 3 colors of putty, all the boards have different colors. So whether it's that sort of stuff or grinding lead paint, I'm a restoration contractor. That means we strip buildings down and we recondition and reprofile molding and oil primers and fillers and more oil primer and then a few more coats of paint. So, it's real durable work. I've got an eye, it really bugs me when I drive down the road and I see chimneys falling apart, the new bridges that are built, news stories that hit the paper. The quality of the concrete comes into question as they're pouring the concrete, but nobody stops and says, "Look, what's going on here? Let's fix this situation before we continue." Then the bridge is done. Then all the spider cracks come through. Then they're polishing the concrete and patching. I mean, it really infuriates me, to see poor quality happen here in the state. So you mentioned Ken Block, all right? Ken Block wants to, cut and I'll say cut and paste, it's a computer term, but now he wants to clip and find savings of waste, and he says we're overburdened with fraud and waste in these public systems. Now, I've always supported a jobs and vendor study here in the state. Yes, we need to listen to the department managers. They know where the waste is here in the state, and that needs to happen, okay? But much like a plane taking off, you've got lift and you've got drag. And the economic engine of investment is what gets the plane off the ground. The taxes follows that. You can't tax and spend. You can't cut and grow the economy. Okay, to me at this point, it's textbook. Anytime the economy's gotten into trouble in the past, whether it be the recession in the 30s or a pullback in the 70s, it's been WPA, it's been CETA, it's been refinance property and come up with a jobs plan. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's textbook, and we missed that opportunity. They did not even call this recession for what it was back in 2009, 10, 11. They didn't even. So we missed all that chance. We have we have so much making up to do. On top of that, we've got 38 studios. That's $200. It's going to cost us $200 million by the time this is all done, and by the time all the lawyers take their piece of the pie. Okay, back in the 2010 campaign, at the League of Women's Voters governor's debate, I said, I can put a Pac-Man machine in the arcade and make more money than the 38 Studios deal. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you, and that's obviously the case, because that video game machine would have been $500, right? And as
opposed to negative $200 million.
$200 million, right.
I love me some Pac-Man. I would put $100 in there personally.
So, I know that the folks here in Rhode Island, they're losing their homes. They don't have access to jobs. The employers are leaving the state. And so that's what I'm focused on, is investment in Rhode Island. Less money to Wall Street, focus $1 billion into the economy of Rhode Island, and the majority of it, as I've explained, setting it up as a revolving fund, not a state bank, but just simply a revolving fund that will continue to work for the property owners and business owners into the future.
In closing into the break, is it possible for career politicians to make the kind of connection with the community that you have without ever having really been a part of that community?
My short answer is no, and I'll tell you why. I grew up in the northern parts of the state. I was born in Woonsocket Hospital. I lived in North Smithfield till I was 8. Then we moved to Cumberland. Then we built a home in North Providence. Okay, I went to LaSalle Academy. I was in homeroom with Gina Raimondo. Okay, we both won that chemistry award. Working with the tradesmen of this state. Okay, from the northern parts. I lived on Block Island for several years. I've worked with the tradesmen of Westerly. I know this state. And as far as leadership goes, it's about new ideas. The legislature, I believe they really want to fix this, okay? And they need a leader. Everyone's entrenched in their little slot, and nobody wants to step outside of their programmed, area to lead this process. And I think the vision that I have for investment in Rhode Island is welcomed. I get the phone calls to back that up. You had Ray Rickman on the show. He personally called me a couple months back, says, Todd, I love your platform. Tell me more. I talk about the investment, the revolving funds for the small businesses and property owners. He says, Todd, this is great. Other folks I know think this is great. This is my concern, that the CVSs are going to have their hands out first, and that all the politicos are going to have their hand out first. And that's not about that, okay? This is about refinancing people. Like J.P. Morgan, $13 billion of foreclosure settlement monies.
Right.
We're going to get another round of those settlement monies. Are we going to send another $2 million check to Wall Street to pay off 38 studios?
Oh, of course.
Or are we going to establish a fund to refinance? They're hardworking people who can afford their homes that are in foreclosure. The courts are clogged with bankruptcy cases. Superior Court still can't get the story straight with the illegal robo-signing foreclosures. And so leadership is about providing, that safety, that feeling that everyone's not selling us out.
Right.
And everyone's following that path, So we are. Not every banker is a bad guy. Not every lawyer is a bad guy. But to fight that status quo, okay, the lawyers that stand up for this, they're getting sanctioned. They're getting fines, and they get pushed out of the inner circle. So we're really up against quite a hill here, and very few people are bold enough to talk about it. And since I ran for governor in 2010, I continue to talk for this jobs plan. My heart is all in it. Again, not the most funded guy for the campaign, but these ideas need to be shared, and that's why I'm in this race.
We're about halfway through the program, which means we do need to take a quick break, which is a good opportunity for you to check out coalitionradio.us. On Facebook, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On Twitter, @Coalition_radio. We'll have more with in-studio guest Todd Giroux after the break.
Heading out on the town tonight? Be sure to log on to providencenightout.com and don't forget to check their cell phone app. That's providencenightout.com.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Jones. When I'm not here yakking about politics, I spin records. That's right, if you like good old-fashioned rock and roll radio the way God intended it to be, then tune in to The Tony Jones Show. The information's online at tonyjones.org. That's tonyjones.org.
I found a picture of you
13 Folds is your definitive source for cannabis culture, with a print magazine, radio show, live events, and so much more. Check them out online at 13folds.com. That's the number 13, FOLDS.com. 13 Folds is your
Good evening, my name is Tony Jones. You are tuned in to the second half of this evening's Coalition, online at coalitionradio.us. On the Coalition, we discuss all sides of local, regional, and national news, politics, and current events. With me in studio, the PO taxpayer is here. PO, good evening.
Hey now.
Christine is here. Chris, good evening.
Good evening.
Our in-studio guest, Mr. Todd Giroux, running for governor in this upcoming election cycle. Todd, good evening.
Good evening.
Todd, I feel like you and I have been talking about robo-signing for years.
Yes, we have, Tony. And it's really disappointing to know that it's taken millions of people in this country losing their homes and very few people stepping outside to call this fraudulent foreclosures for what it is. It's a big property grab. Wall Street's lobbies to change the rules, the laws. And, ironically, right before this whole economy kind of imploded back in, 2007, 8-ish, They didn't see the writing on the walls, but they changed the foreclosure rules. So, people couldn't they could lose their primary home, and that was that was a first for this country, and so it's been a massive equity and property grab. I just can't believe these lawyers can come into our state, tread on traditional property laws where we can talk about the wonkiness of it, but traditional property law says that the mortgage and the title of the home, they travel together. And the whole issue with this foreclosure thing is that they broke that chain of title, and so you got multiple parties claiming they own, have the right to foreclose. And so these lawyers, come into our courts, lie about it, present volumes of paper, and there's no workout plan for the people, and and the folks that stand up for it, like we talked about before the break, they get sanctioned, they get fined, they get their cases kicked out, and meanwhile the banks and those mostly out-of-state attorneys and those same Wall Street types who are funding Gina Raimondo, it's not in-state money that's funding her,
right?
And so this foreclosure issue is the number one thing we can do for the people of Rhode Island, because it continues.
Yeah,
it continues.
And at the same time, these big Wall Street banks maintain no accountability for the property maintenance of the property they seem so hell bent to reacquire.
That's right. They fall apart on the streets waiting for someone to buy them,
so that they can essentially financially blackmail the cities that are surrounding by them. And we hear rhetoric from people like the Fallen Angel of how he's going to enforce that. That seems to be one of the newer age mantras. And yet, a quick ride through the West End or the South End, and you'll continue to see properties that are falling apart, boarded up. We've become sort of a zombie state here for that.
And it's in no one's best interest to have all of these people thrown out of their homes. They have to go somewhere.
Least of all the banks themselves.
Right.
The legislature are the people who can best respond to this at this point. If the courts can't get it right, the legislature should be there to enforce the traditional laws that are on the books, and that alone would protect people in their homes. Mm-hmm. Second to that, we have. Again, it's leadership. Where's the jobs plan for the state? Where's investment in Rhode Island? And the legislature can fix this, but nobody in the 5 years that this has been a recession has stepped out in front to bring forward, a stay on foreclosures here in Rhode Island, to send a message to the courts. Look, get this right. They're taking bank settlement monies, but they won't provide a solution or a flow chart for a better result.
Right.
Well, this state's got a history of taking money, whether it be tobacco money, whether it be gambling money, whether it be mortgage settlement money, and essentially rolling it into the the euphemistic general fund, the black hole, the seventh circle of hell.
I'll take it one step further. Remember the lead paint settlements?
Right.
Okay. I've been in front of, back in the day, I was a young guy. I was 22 years old with, my lead paint license here in the state. And you're sitting in front of an 80-year-old lady with a duplex, right, in tears because they said, they're shutting my home down. This is my only source of income. This is my only place to live, and they're going to shut my home down. Now, when we went through all those lead paint training courses, they said there's going to be a financing mechanism, and it's going to come from the lead paint settlement monies. There was none, and there never was any. Okay, so your eyes are wide open for many years. Watching the money being held by the legislature, whether it be the teachers' pension. Let's just briefly touch on that. How it was the teachers' pension money that bailed out RISDIC. You had Frank Caprio on a few months back, and I thought that was a great show. And that's the takeaway, is that, look, it was the teachers' money, that $80 million that didn't get to grow. It wasn't replaced, and that money didn't get to grow for the last 20 years. So it is sort of a systematic, there's a flow chart problem. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for leadership now.
Well, we lurch from crisis to crisis, and because our leaders are essentially involved in the birth of the crisis, in their rush to pay off the crisis, and their rush to, put lipstick on the pig, to whitewash their own situation clean, we then chase good money after bad. RISDIC was a perfect example of that. No one really went to jail except for Joe Mollicone and I think one secretary. And yet, here's a situation where we had to mortgage part of our future through, again, borrowing from all sorts of state government, from funding that was supposed to be locked in place, from permanently raising the sales tax. We didn't learn from that. So now, flash forward 20 plus years, and we've got 38 special, where again, in a very transparent effort to cover up the ill deeds of Gordon Fox and his cronies, all right, we will again mortgage the financial future of the state in order to pay off bonds that we don't have to pay off, at the same time trying to avoid the harsh light of outside Wall Street types who, if defaulted on, will actually want to know why their money isn't there. So most, there's an old cartoon, folks, for all you young and new millennials, and one of the famous statements from it is, "I've seen the enemy and he is us." And unfortunately, it's Rhode Island leadership that has inflicted these self-inflicted gunshot wounds on the state of Rhode Island economically, philosophically, financially, morally, and as a result, historically. Right.
So being raised here in the state, I've grown up, watching different politicians. And there's history, and some go to jail, some do this, to that, right? But look, if the state can't pay its bills and they want a workout plan, they want to negotiate this, they want to do all this stuff, then it works both ways. People are hurting too. People want to renegotiate, their housing loan. They're fighting for their homes in court. So
right, what's fair for the big guy should be fair for the small guy.
Exactly. So if this is a dialogue, or if they're just talking at us, and we support all of that,
and we need to speak up more and make sure our rights and the rights of our neighbors are being respected.
Well, you had in the last legislative election, Beth Mora was my state senator, and Beth Mora, ironically, works as an investigator for one of the attorneys that you mentioned. And as a state senator, she was lighting the torch against, finding out what went down with robo-signings. Well, and the Democratic machine in the state couldn't abide by that, so they put Ryan Pearson in, who, by the way, talk about Dumb and Dumber, was possibly the only politician in the state who went on record as to the merits of the single-party lever.
Right.
That's how stupid
Wow.
our state
Yeah.
senator is. So you took a voice, a dynamic, aggressive voice out of state government, and you replace it with a true tool, a true cog in the machine. Dan Connor's redux, if you will.
The other thing that happened here with the foreclosures in the state at Superior Court was they established a mediator, and it was the former CEO of Bank Rhode Island, and so it's just unbelievable that in bringing a class action lawsuit to Superior Court, okay, they established, in other words, people who were claimants, they had to pay. They had to continue to pay and pay monthly fees. Now, these are people who are damaged. They're paying the lawyer. Mm-hmm. They're bringing their case to court. They're looking for their moment to state their case and looking for standing. They're begging to be recognized because they're the ones who have equity in these homes. Now, look, this isn't 2007 now. This isn't 2008 where the early people in the foreclosure crisis, they got rototilled, okay? Right. We're talking about now that people have had their mortgages for 15, 20 years. They put 20 to 30% down in their home, okay? They've got serious equity in their home. Mm-hmm. And you get in a pissing contest with that bank, all right? So anyway, they brought their case to Superior Court as a class action lawsuit. And then they were, forced to pay, big monthly fees just to keep their lawsuit alive. And I've never heard of a class action lawsuit that came with that sort of stipulation. So this has been rigged for a long time.
Well, remember, this is the state where if you apply for open public records, you have to pay for the privilege. And actually, Ms. Raimondi became infamous for people filing routine requests for information about the incredible fees that she was paying to her Wall Street cronies. And you got to cough up some do-re-mi to get. So this is the state where you got to pay to play. The meter is truly running.
Right.
Yep.
Now, I got to ask you, I would be remiss because we're some of us are libertarians here anyway. But I think somehow Ms. Houck is sensitive to this issue as well. On yesterday's show, an issue near and dear to Tony and my heart is legalization or regulation, depending on how you want to pose it.
Decriminalization of marijuana.
Right.
I support that.
The clearly, as Tony, I think we all agree.
Recreation, I support that. I want Rhode Island to be the new Amsterdam. I want Rhode Island to be a tourist destination. I think we're first in line. We have an unbelievable surprise that this is going to, people want this.
Well, I think it would be a great idea for Providence too, because it's a downtown area. It's a very walkable city, and you don't necessarily want people under the influence to be driving.
We have a city of cafes, and you mentioned what a beautiful Renaissance city we have. I was the youngest guy in the room when they unveiled the plans for this Renaissance city. It was at the top of the Citizens. At the time, it was a new Citizens Bank building,
right?
And they had all the city planners there, the old architect Warren, and I think I was 21 years old. I was the youngest guy in the room, and it's because I have such a strong tie to the historical preservation of Rhode Island. Even at that young age, I was in the midst of it, and it was unbelievable to see the city transform, moving the canals and having water fire grow, and people love this city. I'm equally appalled that the first night didn't exist. I used to take my boat up to the marina at the Hot Club, make sure we had a spot facing north. We used to watch the fireworks, facing the city. People love this city, and it's an epic failure not to have a first night.
Yeah, I believe the fireworks still went on. I was indoors comforting a dog, but if people aren't out for Bright Night, is there anybody out there looking at the fireworks?
That was just people stealing cars.
Can you imagine what the city would be if we had that European? We really treasure this easy lifestyle we have here, and
I said 20 years ago that we should be the first state in New England to legalize same-sex marriage, because then we would become a tourist destination as well. These reasonably affluent two-income couples would be coming to Rhode Island, spending a little money on their honeymoon.
Right.
What's wrong with that idea?
Well, what's
we ended up lagging.
The thing is that
we lagged the
what's
region.
special about Rhode Island and how Roger Williams assembled this community was that we were a community free from that persecution, that religious judgment, and we were free to exercise our rights, and we were a community signed in charter. That spirit of Rhode Island has been alive, and we want that back.
Yeah,
we dearly want that back.
We need that back. The Puritans did a good job, in a sense, in coming to this country and getting us started. But it's time for us to leave behind some of the puritanical aspects of this region.
People talk about, in PRO yesterday, very heated topic, legalization of marijuana. But, the fact is that if you legalize marijuana, you're going to have a better, more consistent product, safer.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting the money in the right hands. The flow chart of that money is going to be just like why we need a jobs plan.
Right.
Instead of everyone working,
Yeah, we need that money to be in the legal stream,
right.
not in the
working,
underground stream.
under the table doing this and that. I mean, people need to be counted working so they can pay their taxes, so they can afford their food and their house. Right. Big deal. Right. That's all we're trying to fight for is jobs, so we can pay our housing and food.
And we need to stop prosecuting people for something that. It's become mainstream. No one talks about it openly, but it's become fairly mainstream.
Legalizing marijuana is going to, put money in the flow chart. Is going to be an appropriate path. It's going to be safer. It's going to be taxed, and you can pick your sales tax rate. We can still lower the sales tax on general goods, and we can, like fuel, gasoline tax. There's a separate rate for different things. So we can fund education. We can fund infrastructure.
Marijuana is a huge untapped cash cow.
So if we're first in line instead of being last in everything, we can be ahead of the curve. Lower the state sales tax. Every business in the state is regionally competitive by changing one rule. It's a big win for the state. Every business in Rhode Island regionally competitive. Amazing. Marijuana, tourist destination.
Right.
When we send less money to Wall Street, we can create these small business loans, create these property loans, and a jobs plan is going to come out of that, right? That's the small business in the state having cash to buy that car, hire that employee. The property owners, they can afford that furnace.
Right.
That's big money. That can be some of these big houses. That furnace is $40,000.
Yeah, and we could also talk for hours about the property tax in Providence and some of the other hard-hit communities.
I just want to make sure I say that. Look, when you create this $400 million revolving fund for small businesses and property owners, you can charge a competitive interest rate for that. Okay, you can get your 8% off that. Now, look, if it was a Treasury revolving fund that was funding it, we'd be paying 2% for that money. So we'd have to charge 10% to make that 8. Okay, because it's our own money, we can charge 8%, be very competitive. Okay, and that is this equal amount of money that we're looking for in the state pension fund without the hedge funds, without the risk, with a better result focused on Main Street, Rhode Island.
Now, how do you envision making sure that these loans go out to businesses that are on the up and up, that are well-functioning, well-run? How do we avoid
not sending it to CVS, for example? Yeah,
or send it with 38 special.
Right. I just simply think that we're going to be leveraging our bet on the majority of businesses in Rhode Island. You can give somebody a $10,000-$15,000 loan, and you can do that to 45,000 people. Maybe there'll be a few that go bad, but I think the majority of people, they want to work. They're not looking for handouts.
Right. They want their businesses to thrive.
But the same people who are in this Wall Street, those are the same people who they don't want to work with the small businesses of the state.
Right. Microlending actually has a successful history in this state. What we know of the restaurant revolution in Providence was funded largely, interestingly enough, by one Vincent A. Buddy Cianci's revolving loan fund, which was very successful before Cicilline ruined it. All right, was very successful in microlending to restaurants that were starting up that were difficult to finance through conventional channels, as you point out. Banks don't want to loan to restaurants, the entertainment business, radio stations, radio entrepreneurs.
No, they want to loan to people who they can foreclose on if the loan goes bad.
Right.
They're not willing to take any risk.
They want to make all the money without any risk.
All the money, no risk.
But, in getting back to the marijuana issue for just a second, you had yesterday, and I want your reaction to this, you had the same tired rhetoric.
What about the children?
Gateway drug. It all leads to beer.
It's awful.
Out of the Carolyn Medeiros of the world, who, we've got this small army of acronym one-man people who think they're a social movement and then therefore have some legitimacy, who are just tired, playing the same tired war on drugs, the same failed war on drugs. We had Robert Mann here a few weeks ago who pointed out the lunacy of incarcerating the sheer volume of people we do over
tiny amounts
of pot possession. What say you to the Carolyn Medeiroses of the world?
The folks that were dissenting like that were leading the conversation by saying, look, I work in social services and I see all the troubles that this causes. And my first statement was, my college degree is a psychology degree from the University of Rhode Island. And, I've seen more people damaged by prescription drugs. I can't pick at everything out there, but I'll tell you, anybody I know that's gone to Butler has been meted up, drooling on lithium, and I have a psychology degree. I did my interning at Bradley Hospital, and I've seen more people damaged by prescription medicines. Okay, there's never been a pot overdose. Okay,
right.
It calms people down. Now, look, it's not the solution for everybody.
Well, and there are always going to be some people for whom it's a bad solution, but you could say the same thing about alcohol. We tried prohibition for alcohol, and it didn't work.
More people who go, binge drinking and drinking and driving and all these things. And
you can kill yourself much more easily with alcohol.
But let's be brutally honest for a second. Two of the biggest growth industries in this state are gambling and lap dances.
Right.
I mean, this is a state that is the king of self-destructive. We are the Reverend Jims of states here. Right. I mean, we were a state that until recently, prostitution was legal, and during the public hearings in the State House about prostitution, women's groups got up in front of that and argued for maintaining the legalization because it was considered a viable source of employment for a certain underserved part of the community.
People who smoke marijuana want to chill out. Yeah. They want to relax. They want to have a good time. They're not there to be rowdy. They're not fighting. This is it's an unbelievable subject that, people want to go back to prohibition, the olden days and that puritanical lifestyle you mentioned. Well, this is about millennials. Look, you come into office, you don't say, this is what I want and this is how it's going to be, okay? You come in with the attitude, what do you need? What does the next generation need? We're playing such catch up in the economy, and that's why I'm just focused on, I'm focused on jobs, a revolving fund for the small businesses of the state.
The truth of it is a lot of people, a very large cross section of our society, well-to-do people, not so well-to-do people, all ages, all races, are, to some extent involved in consuming marijuana. Only a small chunk of those people are going to get in trouble for it. The law isn't applied fairly.
Right.
And it's time to stop.
The whole basis
it's a facade.
The whole basis of the psychology degrees and understanding social trends and things like that. Okay, it's all based around what you can anticipate and predict, so we can more easily control the outcome. Okay, that's what trends are. That's what statistics is. That's what all that's about. So it's anticipate, predict, and more easily control the outcome. And with this topic of marijuana, it's a millennial choice.
It's not just a millennial choice. I know 60-year-old lawyers and their wives who are
right. I mean, it's an illegal,
and they're not going to get caught. They're not going to get in trouble if they do get caught.
If you've got 70% of the people, creating speeding down the highway, you got to raise the speed limit. You can't just say everyone's going to jail. It's the wrong thing. You can't afford it.
Or you're just not going to apply the law at all, which is more or less what happens now.
So, I think we should, control the supply, tax it, work off the income.
We do have to wrap things up. P.O., Chris, great job as always. Todd, real quick, in our final minute, let everybody out there know how they get a hold of you and involved in your upcoming campaign.
I have a Google website right now. It's Todd Giroux at Rhode Island Governor 2014.com.
And, of course, you're on Facebook. You're
I'm
on
all
Twitter.
over Facebook. Yes, I am.
You are Googleable.
Google.
Actually, Todd, the first time I heard your name, you were running for governor a long time ago, and you were posting on Craigslist doing some guerrilla marketing in the politics section.
We have not done that yet, but I guess I should do that.
Yeah, it's a guerrilla market it, baby. Pimp it out there.
All right,
Work
guys.
it.
We're gonna provide a blog for you guys, and we can get our message out there.
CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on Twitter @Coalition_radio. Until next time.